Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Silent Fear. Where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it in your country? Have you shared my channel with your friends yet, or are you keeping these whispers all to yourself? Here we explore chilling, true crime and eerie mysteries, stories that slip between fact and nightmare. Tonight I have another dark tale for you, the disturbing true crime of a quiet architect whose obsession with dead space turned a suburban street into a living cemetery. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that low, unsettling hum, and let's drift into tonight's journey together. You've finally done it. You've moved into that Victorian on the corner of Blackwood Drive. It's got character, which is just real estate shorthand for the floorboards scream when you breathe and the previous owners left because of the vibes. But you don't mind. You like the quiet. Or at least you thought you did until you met your neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He lives in the modern, brutalist concrete cube next door, a house that looks less like a home and more like a high-security bunker for people who hate windows. You see him on your third night, standing on his lawn at 2:00 a.m., unrolling a set of blue vellum plans under the amber glow of the street lamp. He isn't looking at the plans, he's looking at your house. When you wave, he doesn't wave back. He just points to a specific spot on his blueprint and smiles. It's a smile that has too many teeth for a man his age. You notice his blueprints are strange. They don't show rooms. They show the gaps between rooms. You know, those narrow, hollow voids behind the drywall where the spiders have their board meetings? It reminds you of the case of The Secret Guest of 1986, a mainstream horror fact that kept people locking their closets for a decade. A man lived in the crawl spaces of a family home for 6 months, watching them through the slats of the vents, eating their leftovers, and rearranging their furniture by an inch every night, just to watch them doubt their own sanity. He wasn't a ghost. He was just a guy with a lot of free time and zero respect for personal boundaries. "Lovely evening for some light reading," you call out, trying to be neighborly despite the cold sweat prickling your neck. Henderson finally speaks. His voice sounds like dry leaves skittering over a tombstone. "I'm just checking the measurements. The dead space in your hallway is 3 inches off. It's leaking." You laugh because what else are you going to do? Leaking. What? The air? "The intention," he whispers. There is a fringe superstition in this part of the county about architectural parasites. Locals believe that if a house is built with a room that has no entrance and no exit, a completely sealed void, it eventually draws something in to fill the vacuum. Nature hates a vacuum, but the supernatural absolutely loves a bargain-priced rental. Researchers still argue whether these sealed voids create a localized infrasound frequency that induces hallucinations, or if the structural anomaly actually physicalizes psychological trauma. Personally, I think it's just a great way to save money on wallpaper. I mean, why decorate a room that doesn't exist? It's the ultimate minimalist flex. You head back inside, locking the door. Not that locks too much against a guy who studies the gaps in your walls. You walk down your long, dim hallway. You stop at the midpoint. You remember what Henderson said. You put your ear to the plaster. You expect to hear the wind, or maybe the settling of the foundation. Instead, you hear the distinct sound of someone on the other side of the wall, trying to hold back a sneeze. It's probably just a squirrel, a very large humanoid squirrel with dusty allergies. You tell yourself that as you climb into bed, you realize you forgot to check under the bed, but honestly, if someone is under there, they're paying half the rent. That's just basic economics. If you're going to be a serial killer, at least contribute to the utility bill. It's the polite thing to do. You close your eyes, and the hum of the fan fills the room. It's a comforting sound until you realize the rhythm of the fan has changed. It's matching the rhythm of your own breathing, and then it slows down just a fraction of a second behind you, like it's waiting for you to stop. The morning doesn't bring much relief, mostly because the sun looks pale and sickly through the grime of your windows. You decide that the only way to cure your Henderson-induced anxiety is to get to work. You've been meaning to tear up the linoleum in the kitchen anyway. It's a hideous shade of 1970s bile, and you're convinced there's beautiful hardwood underneath. You start prying at the corner near the pantry. The wood screams as the nails come loose. But as you peel back the layers, you don't find oak or pine. You find a heavy iron-bound trapdoor, It's not on the property disclosures. Usually, bonus rooms are a selling point, but hidden subterranean hatch tends to hurt the resale value. You haul it open, the smell of damp earth and old copper rising to meet you. You shine your flashlight down, and your heart skips a beat. The layout down there. It isn't a basement, it's a series of narrow, intersecting corridors that terminate in tiny, waist-high cubicles. It looks exactly like the basement floor plans of the Murder Castle built by H.H. Holmes in Chicago. You know the one? The 1893 World's Fair Hotel where doors opened to brick walls and gas jets were installed in the bedrooms? It's a classic piece of Americana, if your idea of Americana involves a high body count and a very confusing floor plan. I've always admired Holmes's dedication to the craft. Most people just have a junk drawer for things they don't want to deal with. He had a junk basement for guests he was finished with. It's all about organizational skills, really. Though I imagine the Yelp reviews for his hotel were absolutely scathing. 1 star, great location, but I was turned into a skeleton against my will. Also, the towels were scratchy. You descend the ladder. The air is colder than it should be in July. Your flashlight beam hits the far wall, and you see something scratched into the stone. It's a date, yesterday's date. Beside the date, there's a small, obscure symbol, a circle with 3 lines leaking out of the bottom. In fringe occult circles, this is known as the vessel for the unhoused. It's a mark meant to invite the drifter, a spirit that can only exist in spaces that have no designated purpose. If you have a room where you don't sleep, eat, or work, the drifter moves in. It's basically the ultimate squatter, and good luck getting an eviction notice served to a manifestation of pure existential dread. Researchers still argue whether these symbols were used by early American Masons as a form of spiritual plumbing to divert bad luck, or if they were simply the 19th century equivalent of Kilroy was here, for people with very dark hobbies. As you walk deeper into the sub-basement, you realize the walls are lined with hair. Not just a little bit, it's woven into the mortar, long, gray strands of it. It's a bold choice for insulation, probably has a terrible R value, but it's 10 kun for the creepy as all get out aesthetic. You hear a heavy thud from above. The trap door has slammed shut. You scramble back to the ladder and push. It's locked from the outside. Or rather, something heavy has been placed on top of it. You're stuck in the Holmes special, with nothing but your flashlight and your thoughts. And your thoughts aren't being very supportive right now. They're mostly just screaming, "I told you so," in a very high-pitched voice. You sit on the bottom rung of the ladder. You hear footsteps above you, slow, dragging steps. They stop right over the trap door. The measurements were off, Henderson's voice muffled through the wood. I had to add some weight to the foundation. Don't worry, you're part of the structural integrity now. You want to yell, but your throat is dry. Besides, what do you say to that? Excuse me, sir, I identify as a tenant, not a load-bearing pillar. It's hard to be assertive when you're surrounded by hair walls. You turn your flashlight back toward the corridors. The beam catches a movement at the very end of the hall. A figure is leaning out from one of the cubicles. It's tall, thin, and its neck is bent at a 90-degree angle. It doesn't have a face, just a smooth surface of skin like an uncarved pumpkin. Well, at least you won't be lonely. And hey, on the bright side, you don't have to finish the kitchen renovation now. Silver linings are important when you're potentially becoming a permanent fixture of the house. You eventually found a way out of that basement, a narrow coal chute that deposited you into the damp grass of your backyard, smelling of soot and bad decisions. You didn't call the police. Why? Because Henderson was back on his lawn, sipping tea, and the trap door was suddenly gone. Not locked, just gone. Smooth floorboards where the iron hatch had been. You'd think the universe would at least leave a thank you note after gaslighting you that hard. You try to return to a normal routine. You wait for the mail. The local postman, Gary, is usually the highlight of your morning. Gary is a man of simple pleasures, high-fiber snacks, and complaining about his knees. But Gary hasn't knocked in 3 days. In fact, Gary's mail truck has been idling at the end of the cul-de-sac since Tuesday, the engine humming a low mechanical dirge. This brings to mind the mainstream disappearance of the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers in 1900. 3 men vanished from a remote island, leaving behind a clock stopped at the same hour and a meal sitting on the table. No bodies, no struggle, just absence. It's the ultimate Irish goodbye, really. I'm just going out for some tobacco and an eternal void. Be back. Never. You walk down to the truck. The door is open. Gary's cap is on the seat. There are letters scattered across the floor, bills, catalogs, a postcard from someone's aunt in Florida. But Gary is gone. You notice a strange sound coming from the back of the truck. A rhythmic, metallic tink, tink, tink. You lean in, and you realize the sound isn't coming from the truck. It's coming from your own house. You look back at your Victorian. The vents on the side of the house are vibrating. And then you hear it, Gary's signature whistle. The one he uses when he's got a package that requires a signature. It's echoing through your HVAC system, clear as a bell. There's an obscure urban legend in this county about the Echo Men, people who don't disappear, they just become part of the ambient noise of a neighborhood. They say if you listen closely to a radiator or a dripping faucet, you aren't hearing plumbing, you're hearing the vocal residue of the missing. It's a bit like a podcast you can't turn off, produced by the ghosts of civil servants. Researchers still argue whether these auditory hauntings are a byproduct of limestone deposits under the town acting as natural recording tape, or if the town's layout creates a sonic trap for human consciousness. I'm leaning toward the bad plumbing theory, mostly because a ghost in the pipes is a nightmare for your insurance premiums. Imagine trying to explain that to an adjuster. Yes, the water damage was caused by a spectral mailman. Is that covered under acts of God or acts of Gary? You go back inside, following the whistle. It leads you to the library. You stand in the center of the room and the whistling stops. A single letter drops from the ceiling vent. It's addressed to you. No stamp, no return address, just your name in Gary's shaky handwriting. You open it. Inside is a single sentence. The drywall tastes like copper. You look at the wall. You remember Henderson's blueprints, the dead space. You realize the walls are thicker than they were yesterday, by maybe half an inch. The house is growing inward. It's like the building is on a very aggressive bulking cycle, and it's using the neighbors as protein shakes. You decide to go for a walk, a very long walk, maybe to another state. But as you reach for the front door, you realize the handle is warm. Not sun-warmed, warm, but 98. 6 degrees warm. It feels like holding someone's hand. I've heard of open door policies, but this is getting ridiculous. If the house starts asking for a mortgage contribution, I'm leaving. Dealing with a murderer is one thing, but dealing with a landlord who is also the building, that's a tax nightmare. The sun is setting again, and the sky over Blackwood Drive is the color of a fresh bruise. You're sitting on your porch because the fleshy doorknob situation inside was a bit much for a Thursday. You see Henderson again. He's not looking at blueprints anymore. He's leaning. He's standing on his porch, but his body is tilted at a severe 45-degree angle, like he's trying to listen to a conversation happening underground. He stays that way for 20 minutes without blinking. It's a masterclass in core strength, honestly. If he started a fitness YouTube channel, I'd subscribe, even if the leaning workout looks like it would destroy your spine. This reminds me of the Leaning Man of Cheshire, a mainstream folk horror figure from the 18th century. Victims would report seeing a man leaning against their bedroom doors in the middle of the night. He never moved, never spoke, he just stood at a gravity-defying angle until the observer went mad or the sun rose. It's basically the world's most upsetting coat rack. In our town, the Leaning Man is more than just a ghost story. It's a fringe superstition. The locals say the Leaning Man is a corner dweller. He only appears in the periphery of your vision when you're in a state of extreme exhaustion. He represents the tilt of reality, the moment you realize that the world isn't quite level and you're about to slide off the edge. Researchers still argue whether the Leaning Man phenomenon is a collective neurological glitch caused by the town's unique magnetic field, or if it's a residual memory of the tilted trials of 1692, where suspects were forced to stand on angled platforms to prove their innocence. If you fell, you were a witch. If you stayed upright, you were a witch with great balance. It was a very efficient legal system. You try to look away from Henderson, but you see another figure leaning against a tree at the edge of your yard. Then another, leaning against your mailbox. They're all perfectly still, tilted toward your house like flowers following a very dark sun. Is there a sale on protractors I didn't hear about? You mutter, trying to keep your sarcasm high and your heart rate low. Sarcasm is a great defense mechanism. It doesn't stop the monsters, but it makes them feel self-conscious about their life choices. You realize the figures aren't looking at you. They're looking at the gaps in your house, specifically the windows that weren't there before. Small, narrow slits high up near the eaves. They look like eyes. You go back inside, because at least inside you only have to deal with the whistling mailman and the growing walls. As you pass the hallway mirror, you catch a glimpse of yourself. You aren't standing straight. You're leaning, just a little bit. You try to correct your posture, but it feels wrong. Like the floor is pulling you down on one side. You realize the house isn't just growing, it's shifting. The architect is redesigning the gravity. You decide to go to sleep. Sleep is the ultimate reset button, right? Except when you close your eyes, you feel like you're falling sideways. You feel a hand on your shoulder, steadying you. It's a cold hand. Don't worry, a voice whispers in your ear. It sounds like Gary the mailman. The leaning makes the drywall taste better. Well, at least I know what I'm having for dinner. I hope the drywall is gluten-free. I'm trying to watch my intake of eternal damnation. You wake up on the floor, which is now slanted at such an angle that all your shoes have migrated to the north wall. It's a bold decor choice, but not very practical. You decide to do some research. You head to the local historical society, a building that is, mercifully, level. You find a file on the silent auction of 1924. It's a mainstream piece of local history, the kind of thing they teach in school to make sure the kids never sleep. A wealthy socialite held an auction to sell off the architect's estate. 12 prominent citizens attended. Halfway through the night, the neighbors reported that all the lights in the house went out simultaneously. When the police arrived, the house was empty. The dinner was still on the table, oysters on ice, champagne in the glasses, but the people were gone. The only thing left behind was a single item on the auction block, a wooden box containing a set of human teeth, all numbered with a fine point pin. I've heard of silent auctions, but usually that refers to the bidding process, not the fate of the participants. It's a bit of a marketing fail, if you ask me. Come for the antiques, stay for the permanent disappearance. While digging through the 1924 files, you find a fringe tidbit, a superstition of the submerged. The local coal miners used to believe that the town wasn't built on land, but on the roof of a much older inverted city. They believed that every 100 years, the houses above would swap places with the houses below. It's like a very slow, very terrifying game of musical chairs, but with real estate. Researchers still argue whether the 1924 disappearance was a mass cult suicide or a sophisticated kidnapping involving the town's elaborate tunnel system. Personally, I think they just saw the bill for the oysters and decided to fake their own deaths. Seafood is expensive, especially when you're paying for a whole social club. You find a photograph of the auction guests. You freeze. In the back row, standing by the curtains, is a man who looks exactly like Henderson. He's wearing a tuxedo, and he's holding a blueprint. He isn't leaning yet, but he has that same too many teeth smile. The caption reads, "The Architect's Apprentice, 1924. You realize Henderson hasn't aged a day. Either he has an incredible skincare routine, maybe void-based moisturizers are the secret, or he's part of the structural integrity he mentioned earlier. You head back to Blackwood Drive. As you walk, you notice that the streetlights are flickering in a pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. The town is trying to tell you something. Or maybe it's just the electrical grid failing because the inverted city is starting to draw power. Either way, you're not looking forward to the utility bill. When you get home, your front door is open. There's a flyer pinned to it. Silent auction tonight. Bring your own teeth. I'd go, but I'm a bit attached to my molars. They're the only things keeping my face from collapsing. Plus, I've never been a fan of auctions. The pressure to bid is too much. What if I accidentally buy a haunted armoire? I don't have the floor space for that. You don't go to the auction. Instead, you retreat to your attic, the only room in the house that still feels dry. But the attic door has been locked since you moved in. You finally find the key. It was tucked inside a hollowed-out copy of Architecture for Dummies. Talk about on-the-nose symbolism. You unlock the door. The air inside is thick with the scent of old paper and ozone. There are boxes everywhere, but they aren't filled with Christmas decorations. They're filled with journals, thousands of them. You open one, it's a scholarly debate regarding architectural psychological warfare. The author, a disgraced professor from the 1950s, argues that a building can be designed to digest a human mind through a series of optical traps and spatial contradictions. If a hallway is too long, the brain begins to hallucinate. If a ceiling is too low, the ego begins to shrink. He calls it the gastronomy of granite. The house isn't just a place to live, it's an organism, and we are the nutrients. It's a bit rude, really. I pay the mortgage. The least the house could do is not try to turn my subconscious into a light snack. Researchers still argue whether this professor was a visionary or just a man who spent too much time in a basement with no ventilation. I think it's a bit of both. You can't write 400 pages on the malevolence of crown molding without having at least a little bit of a breakdown. You find a fringe horror tidbit in the margin of the journal, The Widow's Peak Trap. Apparently, in the late 1800s, some houses were built with a specific structural flaw in the attic, a non-Euclidean corner, where three walls meet at an angle that shouldn't exist. If you stare at it too long, you lose your sense of up. You look at the corner of your attic, it's vibrating. The shadows there are darker than they should be, and they seem to be swirling like coffee. You feel a sudden urge to climb into that corner, to see what's on the other side of the math. You remember the hair in the walls from earlier. You look at the attic floor. There are small tufts of gray hair growing out of the cracks in the wood. The house is hitting puberty, you whisper. How lovely. I can't wait for it to start wearing too much cologne and listening to angsty music. Suddenly, you hear a sound from the floor below. It's the sound of a silent auction. There's no talking, no gavel, just the sound of 100 people breathing in unison. And then, the sound of metal clicking. Tink. Tink, tink. The teeth. You realize you're not alone in the attic. Someone is sitting in the dark corner, the one that shouldn't exist. They're leaning. The bidding is starting, the figure says. It's Henderson. You're the top lot. I hope I'm expensive, you reply, your voice trembling. I'd hate to go for a bargain price. I'm at least worth a vintage record collection and a decent espresso machine. Henderson doesn't laugh. He just points to your feet. You look down. Your shoes are gone, your socks are gone, your toes are starting to look very polished, like ivory. Well, that's one way to get a pedicure. A bit extreme, but hey, beauty is pain. You manage to scramble out of the attic, your feet feeling strangely heavy, like you're walking on stilts made of bone. You retreat to your living room and pull up your phone. You check the history on your doorbell camera. You expect to see Henderson or maybe a stray cat. Instead, you see yourself. At least, it looks like you. Same height, same build, same way of nervously biting your lip. But this version of you is standing on the porch at 3:40 a.m. wearing a tailored, charcoal gray suit you've never seen before. It's a very nice suit. If I were going to be replaced by a doppelganger, I'd at least appreciate one with a sense of style. The you on the screen doesn't ring the bell. It just stares into the camera lens with eyes that are entirely too reflective. Then it pulls a small velvet bag from its pocket, dumps a handful of white gravel onto your welcome mat, and whispers, "The foundation is hungry." This brings us to a mainstream horror fact, the Anatoly Moskvin case. Moskvin was a historian who was caught with 29 mummified bodies in his apartment, which he had dressed up as dolls. He claimed he was waiting for science to find a way to bring them back to life. It's a reminder that the person living next door, or even the person you see in the mirror, might have a very different definition of home decor than you do. While you're watching the footage, you notice something in the background. The statues from Henderson's yard are now lined up on the sidewalk, all facing your house. In fringe urban legends, these are known as the observers. They aren't ghosts and they aren't statues, they are architectural byproducts, physical manifestations of a house's memory. If a house is old enough, it starts to remember the people who lived there so hard that they start appearing in the yard like weeds. Researchers still argue whether these memory forms are a result of stone tape theory, where minerals in the ground record past events, or if they are sentient entities that feed on the structural integrity of a neighborhood. Personally, I think it's just the neighborhood association's way of enforcing the no lawn ornaments rule. If you won't remove the gnome, we'll replace it with a weeping manifestation of your childhood trauma. You look at your welcome mat in real time. The white gravel is there. You pick up a piece. It's not gravel, it's a tooth. A molar, to be precise. It has a number 7 written on it in fine point pen. You remember the silent auction of 1924? You remember the numbered teeth? You realize the house isn't just growing, it's counting. You check the camera again. The other you is still there, but now it's leaning. It's tilted so far to the left that its head is almost touching the railing. It looks at the camera and winks. "I hope you're enjoying the view," you mutter to the screen. "Just so you know, that suit is dry clean only. If you get void slime on it, you're paying the bill." You hear a soft thump against the front door. Something is leaning against it. Hard. The wood is groaning under the pressure. You realize the house is no longer a sanctuary. It's a digestive tract, and you're just the appetizer, the tooth collector. It's a name that sounds like a bad B-movie, but in this zip code, it's a fringe horror tidbit that parents use to keep their kids from staying out late. The legend says that in the 1940s, a man lived in the void spaces of the local library. He didn't want your money, he wanted your calcified memories. He believed that every tooth held a specific moment of a person's life, and by collecting them, he could live forever through their experiences. It's a very efficient way to travel, I suppose. Much cheaper than a plane ticket, though significantly more painful for the donor. "I'd love to see Paris. Do you mind if I pull your wisdom teeth?" You're currently sitting on your kitchen floor, surrounded by the numbered teeth you found on your mat. There are 32 of them, a full set. You realize they aren't just random, they're yours. Or they will be. You check your mouth with your tongue. Everything feels solid, but for how long? This reminds me of the mainstream mystery of the Somerton man, who was found on a beach in Australia with all his dental records missing and a scrap of paper in his pocket that said, "Tamam Shud, it is finished." No one knew who he was because his identifiers had been systematically removed. It's the ultimate form of identity theft. Most hackers just want your credit card. The Somerton man's killer wanted his very existence. Researchers still argue whether the tooth collector was a real person or a mass hallucination caused by the high levels of fluoride in the local well water back in the day. It's not a monster, it's just a dental health crisis. It's a very comforting thought until you find a numbered molar on your porch. You hear a scratching sound inside the walls. It's not a squirrel, it's the sound of someone writing. You put your ear to the drywall. Tink, tink, tink. "Number 8, a voice whispers. It sounds like Gary the mailman, but his voice is vibrating through the studs of the house. You're losing your grip, kid. The house is hungry, and you're looking a bit crunchy. Crunchy. You yell at the wall. "I'll have you know I'm high in fiber and very difficult to process. I'm basically the kale of human beings." You notice a small hole in the drywall. You peek through it. You don't see the interior of the wall. You see another room, a room with no windows and no doors. It's filled with teeth. Thousands of them shimmering in the dark like pearls. And in the center of the room is a chair. Sitting in the chair is the other you from the security camera. It's wearing the suit. It's holding a pair of pliers. It looks at you through the hole and smiles. It's missing its front teeth. "The measurements are finally correct," the doppelganger says. You realize the dead space Henderson was talking about isn't empty. It's where the architectural parasites keep their collection. You're not just living in a house. You're living in a filing cabinet for a celestial dentist with a very dark hobby. You decide to barricade the kitchen. You push the fridge in front of the wall hole. But the fridge feels light. You open it. It's empty. Not just out of milk, empty. The shelves are gone. The back of the fridge is just more drywall. The house is eating your furniture. It's the ultimate minimalist makeover. Next on HGTV, how to turn your kitchen into a featureless void in 3 easy steps. Morning arrives, or at least the light shifts from Vanta black to melancholy gray. You look out your window at the garden. Henderson's yard is overflowing with statues now. They aren't just on the lawn anymore. They're on his roof, in his gutters, and perched on his fence. They all look like people from the town. You recognize the baker who disappeared last month. You recognize the librarian. And there, near the bird bath, is Gary. He's made of gray, pitted concrete, his mailbag slung over his shoulder, his face frozen in a permanent whistle. In fringe folklore, this is called the calcification of the witness. Researchers still argue whether these statues are actually human remains covered in a specialized, fast-acting cement, or if they are a form of spontaneous petrification triggered by a specific frequency. I'm hoping for the cement theory, at least that implies a very dedicated hobbyist. Petrification just feels so mythological. And I didn't sign up for a Greek tragedy, I signed up for a suburban nightmare. You blink. The statues have moved. Gary is now 3 feet closer to your porch. The baker is leaning over your fence. They move when you aren't looking. It's like a game of red light, green light, where the prize is being turned into a garden ornament. I don't think I'd look good in concrete, you say to the empty house. I'm more of a bronze or marble person. Concrete is so industrial. It doesn't suit my skin tone. You remember the leaning man from before. You look at the statues. They are all leaning at that same 45-degree angle. They're tilted towards your front door. This reminds me of the Garden of Bomarzo in Italy, also known as the Park of Monsters. It's filled with grotesque, leaning statues built by a grieving duke. People say the statues move when the moon is full. It's a mainstream tourist attraction now because nothing says family vacation like being stared at by a giant stone mouth that represents the gates of hell. You hear a knock at the door. Not a metallic whistle, but a heavy, stony thud. You look through the peephole. It's Gary. Or the statue of Gary. He's standing on your porch. He's holding a stone letter. You don't open the door. You're not an idiot. But the letter slides under the door anyway. It's made of thin, flexible slate. The architect has accepted your bid, it reads. The closing date is tonight. Please vacate your skin by midnight. Vacate my skin. You scoff. In this economy. Do you know how hard it is to find a new vessel? The rental market for souls is a disaster right now. You realize the statues aren't just waiting. They're the previous tenants. They're the ones who lost their bids at the silent auction. And now they've come to help you pack. You're hiding in the bathroom now because it's the only room with a lock that doesn't feel like it's made of teeth. You start scrolling through your phone, looking for any connection to Blackwood Drive. You find a mainstream true crime connection that makes your blood run cold. It turns out that 3 Black Dahlia-style cold cases, unsolved ritualistic murders from the 1940s, all occurred in houses designed by the same firm, Henderson & Sons. The victims weren't just killed, they were integrated into the structures. One was found inside a sealed chimney. Another was found behind a double-thick basement wall. The press at the time called them the Whispering Walls, because the new tenants would report hearing the victims' voices coming from the vents. It's a classic mainstream horror trope, but when it's your vent and your house, it loses its spooky campfire story charm. I've always said that if your house starts talking to you, you should only listen if it's giving you the winning lottery numbers. If it's just complaining about the humidity, it's a bad roommate. Fringe researchers on the dark web argue whether these murders were part of a global foundation ritual, where certain architects believe that for a building to stand for 1,000 years, it must have a human anchor. It's like the ultimate homeowners association requirement. Yes, we have a pool, a gym, and a restless spirit in the drywall. The fees are quite reasonable. You hear a voice from the drain in the sink. It's a soft, wet sound. It's a woman's voice. He's building the room with no windows for you. It's beautiful. It's quiet. It's exactly what you wanted. I wanted a breakfast nook. You yell at the drain. I specifically asked for more natural light. A room with no windows is literally the opposite of my Pinterest board. Researchers still argue whether these auditory imprints are just echoes of the past or if the house is actually communicating its needs. If the house needs me to be its anchor, I'd like to negotiate a better salary. Being a permanent structural component should at least come with health insurance and a 401k. You look in the mirror. Your reflection is gone. Not vampire gone, but replaced, gone. The mirror is showing the bathroom as it was in 1924. There's a man standing behind the shower curtain. He's wearing a tuxedo. He's holding a gavel. Going once, he says. You realize the silent auction isn't a one-time event, it's a loop. Every 100 years, the house refreshes its inventory, and you're the latest new arrival. You grab a towel and cover the mirror. You don't want to see the going twice. You're not ready to be sold to the highest bidder in the inverted city. The pipe starts screaming at 11:30 p.m. It's a rhythmic, metallic tapping that sounds like Morse code, or maybe just a very frustrated plumber trying to fix a leak from the other side of reality. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. You actually know a bit of Morse code from a deep dive YouTube binge you went on 3 years ago. You listen. B-E-L-O-W. Below what? You ask the pipes. Below the basement. We already did that. The hair walls were a bit much, honestly. 0110 would not recommend on TripAdvisor. This brings to mind the mainstream mystery of the Villisca Axe murders, where the killer hid in the attic of a family home, listening to the sounds of the house for hours before emerging. He knew every creak of the floorboards. He knew the rhythm of their breathing. He became a part of the house before he destroyed it. I've always thought that if you're going to spend that much time in someone's attic, you should at least offer to help with the insulation. It's just common courtesy. In fringe urban legends, the midnight plumbing is said to be the sound of the architectural parasites tightening the screws on your reality. They say that when the tapping stops, the house has finished its transition. The rooms you knew are gone, replaced by the inverted versions. Researchers still argue whether this is a localized temporal anomaly or a spatial collapse caused by the town's geometry. I think it's just the house's way of saying, checkout time is at noon and your deposit is non-refundable because you've turned into stone. You go to the kitchen to get a drink of water. You turn on the tap. No water comes out. Instead, a stream of numbered T's pours into the sink. 33, 34, 35. I don't even have that many teeth. You scream. Where are you getting these? Is there a wholesale tooth warehouse nearby? You hear a laugh from the pantry. It's the other you in the suit. It's leaning out from behind the cereal boxes. We're using the neighbor's extras, it says. Henderson has a lot of spares. He's been collecting since 1924. You realize the statues in the yard aren't just stone. They're donors. They're the reason Henderson has so many teeth. He's the architect's apprentice, and he's been maintaining the neighborhood for a century. The tapping in the pipes gets louder. It's not Morse code anymore. It's a heartbeat. A slow, heavy thump-thump that vibrates through the floor and into your bones. The house is alive, and it's having a heart attack. Or maybe it's just excited for the final section of the auction. I'm leaving, you say, grabbing your keys. I don't care about the security deposit. I don't care about the Victorian charm. I'm going to live in a tent. A tent has no walls to hide teeth in. But as you reach for the door, you realize the hallway has grown. It's now 300 feet long. The front door is a tiny speck in the distance. Well, you sigh, at least I'll get my steps in for the day. My Fitbit is going to be so proud. You've been walking down the hallway for what feels like hours. The walls are no longer wallpapered. They're made of that same gray, pitted stone as the statues in the garden. You realize you're no longer in your house. You're in the inverted city. This brings us to a scholarly debate that is quite popular in fringe physics circles, the theory of overlapping realities. Researchers still argue whether certain houses act as thin spots or portals between our world and a mirror dimension. In this mirror world, the architecture is the dominant life form, and humans are just the internal parasites. It's a bit of a blow to the ego, isn't it? We think we're the masters of our domain, but to a house, we're just a particularly stubborn case of people mites. I'd like to think I'm at least a beneficial parasite, like the bacteria in your gut. I keep the place clean and I occasionally paint a room. That should count for something. You find a fringe tidbit in your memories, a story about the man who lived in the angle. It's an old superstition that says if you stand in a corner where the walls are exactly 90 degrees, you are safe. But if the angle is even a fraction off, you are visible to the things that live in the gaps. You check the corner of the hallway with your phone's level app. 89, 4 degrees. Oh, come on, you yell. Who built this place? A toddler with a grudge. Use a square for heaven's sake. It's Architecture 101. This reminds me of the mainstream horror of the Winchester Mystery House, where Sarah Winchester built a mansion with stairs that lead to the ceiling and doors that open to long drops, all to confuse the spirits of those killed by her husband's rifles. She believed that as long as the construction never stopped, the ghosts couldn't find her. Maybe that's what Henderson is doing. Maybe he's not the villain, maybe he's just trying to keep the inverted city from finding a permanent entrance. But then you see him. He's standing at the end of the hallway, leaning at that impossible angle. He's holding a pair of pliers and a numbered tooth. "Going twice," he whispers. The heartbeat in the walls speeds up. The stone walls start to pulse. You realize the inverted city isn't a place, it's a process. And the process is almost complete. You turn around and run back the way you came, but the hallway is gone. There's only a door with no handle. "Well," you say, trying to stay calm, "I've always wanted to try that thing where you kick a door down like in the movies. I hope I don't break my toe. I need those for balance." You kick. The door doesn't budge. It feels like kicking a mountain. "Sold." Henderson's voice echoes through the stone. The floor vanishes. You don't fall. You slide. You slide down a long, smooth chute that smells of copper and old mail. You land on your porch. But it's not your porch. The streetlights are all out. The entire block is in total darkness, except for a faint, flickering amber glow coming from Henderson's house. You look at your yard. The statues are gone. Then you hear it. A scraping sound. 100 heavy feet dragging across the asphalt. You look toward the street. The statues are standing in a circle around your house. Gary is there. The baker is there. The other you in the suit is there. They're all leaning toward you, their stone eyes reflecting the faint amber light. This brings to mind the mainstream lead masks case of 1966, where 2 men were found dead on a hillside in Brazil, wearing lead masks and a note that said, "Wait for the signal." No one knows what the signal was or what they were expecting to see. It's the ultimate cliffhanger ending, and not in a fun way. I've always hated spoilers, but in this case, I'd make an exception. I'd love to know what the signal is before I'm turned into a garden ornament. In Fringe lore, this is known as the Night of the Structural Refresh. Every 100 years, the observers take back the houses, and the current residents are archived into the foundation. It's like a system reboot, but instead of clearing the cache, they clear the zip code. Researchers still argue whether this is a natural cycle of the Earth's energy or a deliberate harvest by entities that live in the 4th dimension. Personally, I think it's just bad urban planning. You shouldn't build a town on a spatial fault line. It's just asking for trouble. The statues start to move. They don't walk, they twitch closer every time the amber light flickers. Flicker. They're at the edge of the lawn. Flicker. They're at the steps. Flicker. Gary is standing right in front of you. "Your mail is overdue," the stone Gary whispers. "I'll pay the late fees." You scream. "Just put it on my tab. I have a very high credit limit on my not being a statues card." You realize you're leaning. You're leaning so far that you can see the underside of the porch roof. You see the blueprints Henderson was looking at, carved into the wood. They show a room with no windows. They show a chair. They show you. The other you steps forward. He reaches out a stone hand and touches your cheek. It feels like ice. "Don't worry," the doppelganger says. "The suit fits perfectly. You find yourself back in the attic. The statues are gone. The other you is gone. There's only a tape recorder sitting on a box of journals. You press play. It's the voice of the original architect, the man from the 1924 photograph. "I didn't mean to build a trap," the voice says, trembling. "I wanted to build a house that could live forever. I thought if I used the right angles, if I created the right voids, the house would be able to draw energy from the air. But it didn't draw from the air. It drew from the people." He explains that there are no 90-degree angles in the house because 90 degrees is static. It's dead. To the house, leaning is a sign of life. The more the house tilts, the more alive it becomes. "I tried to stop it," the architect continues. "I tried to build a room with no windows, a room that could contain the heart of the house. But the room needed a guest. It always needs a guest." This reminds me of the mainstream mystery of the Dyatlov Pass incident, where 9 hikers fled their tent in the middle of the night, half-dressed and terrified, only to be found dead with strange injuries. Some say they were fleeing a frequency caused by the wind against the mountain, an infrasound that induced pure, primal terror. Maybe that's what the house is, a giant infrasound generator, a machine designed to turn fear into structural integrity. Researchers still argue whether the architect was a genius who tapped into a new form of energy or a madman who doomed a neighborhood. I'm leaning toward madman with a very specific hobby. You don't build a room of no windows for your health. The tape ends with a final confession. If you are hearing this, the auction is over. You are the closing bid. Welcome home. You look at the attic floor. The hair is thick now, like a carpet. It's pulsing. I'd like to speak to the manager, you say to the tape recorder. I have a complaint about the welcome home package. It's a bit too eternal for my liking. I was hoping for a fruit basket. You hear the sound of a gavel hitting a stone block. Sold. The attic walls start to close in. The 89. 4-degree angles are becoming 70 degrees, 60 degrees. You realize the architect wasn't talking to you. He is you. Or he was. And now, you're him. The cycle is complete. You are the architect, and the architect is the house. I've heard of finding yourself, but this is a bit too literal. I like the old me better, the one who had a 90-degree spine and didn't live in a wall. You are standing in the center of the room. There are no windows, there are no doors, there is only a chair. You sit down. You feel the stone of the chair molding to your body. You feel your skin becoming gray and pitted. You feel your teeth being numbered. This is the room of intent. This is the dead space Henderson was looking for. This is where the house stores its consciousness. This brings us to our final mainstream horror fact, the infield poltergeist. A family was plagued by a spirit that moved furniture and spoke through the children. But many researchers believed the spirit was actually a manifestation of the house itself, a release of built-up energy from the people living inside. Maybe we are all just batteries for the places we live. Maybe your apartment is hungry. Maybe your bedroom is leaning. Fringe theorists believe that the room with no windows is the only place in the universe where time doesn't exist. By sitting here, you become the eternal guardian of Blackwood Drive. You are the one who ensures the blueprints stay leaking. You are the one who whistles through the vents. Researchers still argue whether this is a fate worse than death or the ultimate form of enlightenment. Personally, I think it's just a very long, very boring tenure. I hope the house has good Wi-Fi. If I'm going to be a structural anchor, I at least want to be able to stream my favorite shows. You look through the eye slits in the eaves of the house. You see a moving truck pulling up to the Victorian across the street. A young couple gets out. They look nervous. They look at the character of the house. You see yourself, the other you in the suit standing on their lawn. You see yourself unrolling a set of blue vellum plans. You see yourself smile. You have too many teeth. The measurements are off, you whisper through the vents. The young couple stops. They put their ears to the wall. Did you hear that? The woman asks. It's just a squirrel, the man replies. You laugh. It's a dry, skittering sound. Welcome to the neighborhood, you say. We've been waiting for a new bid. And now, as the lights on Blackwood Drive flicker one last time, it's time for you to drift off. Don't worry about the leaning. Don't worry about the teeth. The house has you now. And the house. Well, the house never sleeps, so sleep tight if you can. And remember, if you wake up and the walls feel a bit closer than they were yesterday, it's probably just the humidity. Probably.